Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to be part of the show. This is the all-new Sports Cage. It's Maz filling in for Barney. The Sports Cage is brought to you by the Canadian Brewhouse. Wing Wednesdays are unbeatable at the Canadian Brewhouse. Only 69 cents each and a mountain of flavors to savor and a flavor of the month. Do that wing thing every Wednesday at the Canadian Brewhouse. All right. Lots happening in Riderville today. Some big signings coming that I know is putting the smiles on faces for a lot of us fans here in Rider Nation, including one key free agent signing that I said was the most important person they needed to sign as soon as the season was over. Let's bring in our next guest to dive right into this on the Western Pizza Guest Hotline. He's a little under the weather, but he's deciding to play injured or hurt or do what he can for the team. Ladies and gentlemen, Saskatchewan Roughrider historian Rob Vanstone. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm okay, Chris. Just a viral infection that every time I think it's over, it regenerates itself and returns with a vengeance. So my voice sounds a little worse than usual, and it's not even great under optimal conditions. I hope you and your listeners and viewers will forgive me.
Well, the good thing about having free health care in this country is, A, it's free and it's easily accessible. Dripping serves. So last week, I've
had such great healthcare experiences lately. So I went to have a heart monitor installed at the hospital today, just a precaution. And I had the greatest chat with the person who installed it. We both have rescue dogs. We talked dogs for like 10 minutes while she was installing this thing, and then we showed each other pictures of our rescues, and I couldn't have had a better experience with the healthcare system today. I just hope I don't have to use it again for a while.
Well, we got an after Christmas shock. I go to get a prescription refilled the other day, and the clinic that we go to, they have an online booking system now. So you have to go in and you have to select your doctor and the date and all of that. And so I see the doctor's name, but there's no dates available. I'm like, well, maybe they're on vacation. It's January. I mean, listen, we're trying to escape the cold weather. So then nothing, and I eventually go there, and I had asked about the doctor, and they said, oh no. They had a medical incident a couple of weeks ago and they had to retire. And I'm like, so we're out a family doctor. So now we're on a list for someone that they think is going to be coming in the next couple of months to do that. And which is okay. But my thing is now is I wish I had a more personal relationship with the doctor, or like a self to find out if they're just okay as a person. Regardless of that, all of a sudden they went from, I saw them, I think, at the end of November to they're done. And I don't know if the receptionist was supposed to tell us that, that they had a medical event and they had to retire in. So I'm like, holy. So I hear you. And it's great to hear. There's a lot of good people in the healthcare systems. My sister's a nurse. My niece is a nurse. Some other family in the medical system. So, yeah. All right, let's talk football. How I said it when the season ended, the most important free agent that the Riders needed to sign wasn't the quarterback. To me, it's what he was able to do on defense and sort of bring Corey Mace's vision to the field. And the dominance was Jameer Thurman. And then about an hour ago, we get the press release from Ariel. Thurman signed for 2 years that he is going to be in Riderville. How good of news is that?
Yeah, it's tremendous news, not just to have him back for this year, but for next as well. I think that holds true for a lot of players who are returning. And this is now the 10th to re-sign since the season ended. Malik Carney's re-signing was also announced earlier today. And it's so tough to have continuity in the Canadian Football League with one-year contracts being as popular as they are with players and agents, and in some cases, the teams. So to get somebody of that caliber for multiple years is massive. I mean, the middle linebacker is pretty much the quarterback of the defense. It's somebody who fit in so seamlessly because of his previous association with Corey Mace and that defensive philosophy, and just such a solid leader. I mean, if you're a newcomer to Canadian football or a newcomer to a team and you want to see how it's done, just watch Jameer Thurman for even 10 minutes and emulation will serve you very well.
Down the stretch, watching some of those games where Thurman was dominant, like he was all over the field. And it didn't necessarily mean that he was around the ball and the play, but he was disrupting something somewhere else where the ball eventually ended up. And that's where it was like, okay, and you're watching to be, it's all of the little things that you would see on an all 24 shot, but don't necessarily make the highlights that you're going to see again and again on TSN. Now, he did have some highlight reel stuff. And I think, like you had said, this is the 10th player to re-sign. This bodes well, especially for anybody else that they may be courting in free agency or the offseason to be like, listen, we're building something special here. And this is the part that I hate about the CFL and these one-year contracts. How do you build a team when everybody could be, one and done in less than 52 weeks?
Yeah, that does make it challenging. And one of the luxuries the Rough Riders have had is that they've been able to reach 2-year deals with a number of people going back to last year. Can you imagine what a free agent bidding frenzy there might be for Roland Milligan Jr. had he not signed a 2-year contract entering last season, for example. So, Samuel Emelis is another example. So it's nice to have those in the back pocket entering the off season. One of the things that I think, you referenced Jameer Thurman, and you sometimes there are things that people might not see, but also I think you have to put into context the things that are obvious. And it's not just that he had interceptions, that he forced fumbles, that he recovered fumbles, but you look at when those plays were made, junctures in those games, the strip, the tackle and strip of Nick Dembski when Winnipeg was here. That was crucial. An interception in Calgary that pretty much salted away the game. Early season fumble recoveries that were so crucial. It's not just a matter of accumulation of numbers, but when you look at the junctures in the games and the junctures in the season when those numbers were recorded, I think that's an important consideration as well.
You had mentioned Malik Carney also signed an extension earlier in the day. That came out early this morning, 1 year. And I had said before you came on, a lot of us had high expectations for Malik Carney. But to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, I thought it took him about a third of the season to really fit into Corey Mace's season. And then the final 2/3 of the season is that with the Malik Carney that we saw, that we thought we were getting from Hamilton, where he was starting to take over games and he was starting to get double teamed and he was really started to make his presence felt on the field. But to me, I felt like it took a while for him to get into the Rider system.
And he was dealing with some injury issues as well that kind of put things on hold and put things on pause a little bit. And Corey Mace mentioned that today, talking with the media from the CFL winter meetings, that as his availability increases, I think the numbers will be higher as well. But I think there's a lot of things that he does that don't necessarily appear on the stat sheet. And Corey Mace also referenced that. I mean, this is somebody who can play multiple spots and perform multiple roles. And he's athletic enough that if you need him to drop back into coverage and almost mimic what a linebacker would do, he can do that as well. So, and I think the second year in the system, second year in Saskatchewan is going to be so beneficial as well. Continuity is just such an important thing. And as you mentioned, it can be a bit of an elusive goal sometimes when 1-year contracts are in vogue. So to have him added to the list too, where I think in year 2 with the Rough Riders, he could really blossom.
So what was it? It was last Friday, Jake Maier, the press conference after signing the 1-year deal with the Riders. He was going through and he was talking about now being part of Rider Nation. And, you've heard it a million times. Everybody talks about, but then once they become part of Rider Nation, I don't necessarily know that people fully grasp what it's like to be part of this until they're here and they're in the pressure cooker. But as I'm watching the press conference, football is the ultimate team game. It takes 12 on each side. It's the ultimate team game until things go really wrong. And then Jake Maier, you're a team of one turned out into the media and to the fans by yourself for having an incredibly bad year, and all the blame comes down on you. I still feel bad for him. The whole Calgary debacle was not all on him. Okay, he had receivers drop balls. There was questionable coaching and all of that. But for a guy that had to wear a lot of the blame for the Stampeder problems last year, he kind of, to me, seems like he's got thick skin and broad shoulders to be able to handle that and kind of be okay.
Yeah, even talking to him last week, Chris, it seemed a lot like talking to Trevor Harris. Just seems to have a maturity beyond his years. And I'm not really well versed in discussing maturity because I'm still immature. Pushing 61, and I'm kind of proud of that as well. It's a badge of honor when you're trying to pretend that you're sort of young. But I was so impressed with Jake Maier, and if a low watermark for a quarterback, at least in terms of maybe a perception that's out there as a result of Calgary's difficult season last year. If a low watermark is finishing third in the league in touchdown passes with 22, what's the high watermark? He got through that with some pretty impressive numbers and productivity that was put him in the upper echelon of quarterbacks last year. And so could you imagine if he's in a situation that might be more conducive to success than the one he was in last year? I really am intrigued by this. I've always enjoyed watching him play, watching him throw the football. And his three visits to Mosaic Stadium as the starter for Calgary, he had a quarterback efficiency rating exceeding 100 in all three of them. And so it seems to be a profitable surrounding for him.
You see the quarterback DNA that the Dickinson Huffnagel always looked for and have been successful with. And for whatever reason, it just got off the rails, but it's there. But like you had said, when he's on, he's great. He's efficient. Like, he can throw the ball. He can make those throws. And what people don't realize with the Stamps last year, they were 4-4 one time. And those 4 losses, I think they lost those games 6 points or less. They could have potentially, now ifs, buts, candies, and nuts, they could have been 8-0. And it's a whole other thing. And there probably wouldn't be a Vernon Adams in Calgary. The landscape would be completely different. And then I like what Luke said Friday when he was on with Barney. It's a 1-year deal, kind of get to know you. It's early dating. Hey, if it works well, we can sign you to a long-term thing. And if it doesn't work, and maybe if it's not, the Riders aren't tied to anything and everybody just moves on. But this could be a really nice off-season steal. You'd mentioned that the winter meetings are going on in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we're going to hear from Coach Corey Mace before the show is through today. A lot's going on. McLeod Bethel-Thompson signs with the Montreal Alouettes. As far as Davis Alexander's backups, could there be anybody better? That's a solid move by Danny Machocha and Jason Moss.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the quarterbacking equation across the league right now, Chris, you're seeing players who were starters last year, began last season as unrivaled starters, now coming into situations where they're in a support capacity, which tells you that the depth of quarterbacking in the CFL is much greater than it was a few years ago, when there were some questions as to whether you could even find 9 bona fide starters. Now the depth is such that you look at Cody Fajardo going into Edmonton. You look at Jake Maier coming here. You look at McLeod Bethel-Thompson going to Montreal. And a lot of teams are too deep, and you can never be too deep when it comes to quarterbacking. So that's a really positive sign as well for the Canadian Football League. And, McLeod Bethel-Thompson is another guy, not unlike Jake Maier, who was north of 20 touchdown passes last year and is now moving to a different situation. It's nice to have that veteran presence behind your starter. And McLeod Bethel-Thompson, it's a great trivia question. Him and Trevor Harris were teammates in Sacramento. I think it's of the United Football League in 2011. And one of their teammates was John David Washington, the son of Denzel Washington. So
he was great in the TV show Ballers. Like, that is one of the, he's actually a great actor. When you mention Sacramento in football, to me, it's always going to be David Archer and the Gold Miners. There will
Fred
never
Anderson,
be anybody else.
Yeah,
how did we
segue into that?
How did we end up losing to those teams? I still remember there was a Saturday night game. They were in Vegas to play the Posse, and Anthony Calvillo was just a young punk, and the Riders ended up losing. I can't even remember. It was in the early 90s.
Yeah, it was 94, and the temperature was exceeding 100 Fahrenheit, and it was an absolutely blistering surrounding. It's amazing anybody on either team got through that game.
Speaking of the year 1994, nice segue, Rob. Colson, do you want to bring up your camera and come on the screen? I know you weren't alive when this happened, but the names Nancy Kerrigan and Tanya Harding, do they mean anything to you? Anything at all?
They do not.
They do not. Well, today is a big day in sports history because, Rob, you and I remember this. I was working at the radio station in Moose Jaw. You would have been working at the Leader Post. Tanya Harding's goons, Jeff Galooly, her husband, or soon-to-be husband, and his buddy, were arrested for clubbing Nancy Kerrigan. So I explained to the youngins on the show what happened back then. The Olympic trials were happening, and Tanya Harding, who would you say had a little bit of a rougher upbringing than a prim and proper Nancy Kerrigan, who they were vying for spots on the figure skating team for the U.S. Olympics, and she got clubbed in the parking lot, basically. She got shanked. And then from there, but don't you remember back in the day, Rob, this took over not only the sports headlines, but this was the news headlines. This was the dominating top story everywhere.
It was everything for an extended period. And then, comes the leading into the Olympics, and then there comes that fateful day when they're both competing. And Nancy Kerrigan winning the silver medal, and Tanya Harding's skate lace coming undone. Just when you think it couldn't get any more bizarre, then Tanya Harding's skate lace comes undone. I mean, my goodness,
then she's crying and the emotions, and
and then we had the Saleh Pelche scandal a few years, or the scandal as a result of the judging with Saleh and Pelche. It just seems we couldn't get through the Winter Olympics without a scandal and occurrences that just transcended sport.
And that was back when there was only, well, we didn't call ourselves this at the time, mainstream media. There was only radio, TV, and newspaper. There was no internet. There was no anything. So you could only get it from like certain play. Remember when we used to be essential, Rob? We were essential services, and now it's kind of like we're an eighth, ninth choice sometimes, potentially. But I remember
my wife assures me that I'm far from essential.
Well, we consider you essential today because when I emailed you, like, hey, last minute, chance we can get you on the show. All right. So you did some good work. You wrote a great article. Former Saskatchewan Roughrider quarterback Steve Sarkisian, coach of the Texas Longhorns, was in the college football semifinals on the weekend. They end up losing to Ohio State, and the Sarkisian dream is over. It's going to be Notre Dame taking on Ohio State for the college football championship. Are you surprised that how many players have come through the Rider organization that have gone on to become really good college coaches? Like you've got the Tino Sunseries, you've got and I should say the CFL, then you've got the Cliff Kingsburys, and you're going to get the Seth Daggys in there, and these guys that maybe it didn't work out necessarily up here as players, but then they go on to have these nice careers in college that are going to provide them, they're going to be set up for really nice lives.
In the case of Tino Sunseri, I mean, he came from a football family. His dad was a longtime football coach. It was just in the blood there, and that seemed to be his destiny from basically birthright. And we've had a few precedents going way back. Glenn Dobbs, who was a Rider quarterback from 51 to 53, ended up coaching at the University of Tulsa, and was so accomplished as a football coach there, they named Glenn Dobbs Drive after him right outside the stadium. So, Jack Hartman, who was a Rider quarterback in the early 50s, he ended up becoming a legendary American college coach in basketball. And I think they named the arena after Jack Hartman. So there's, going back even before I was born, which is saying something, Riders have been a pretty productive reservoir for collegiate coaches, not just in Canada, but in the United States.
So 1 week from tonight, it will be the Ohio State Buckeyes taking on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And they're going to play that in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the college football championship. I'm thinking when they expanded to a 12-team playoff this year, that the committee and everybody, if you would have said it's going to be Ohio State and Notre Dame, there's no way in the world the reason why we're going to 12 teams is so we can avoid something like this and never have this happen. There's no sexy SEC team in there. I mean, Notre Dame, they don't play in a conference. And I don't know if you saw this, but for them winning that game last week, for beating Penn State, they get from the payout is $20 million for that win that they would share amongst their conference.
That'll pay the NILs for like 3 guys, right?
Yeah. Speaking of that, let's see here. I know that with Georgia quarterback Carson Beck hit the transfer portal, and he got $4 to $5 million to go play for the Miami Hurricanes. He was the Georgia Bulldogs quarterback that got injured in one of the playoff games, and he wasn't able to play in the semifinal. And then now from there, but his girlfriend goes to the University of Miami. She's a Hurricane basketball player, and apparently word came out that this caused a lot of problems on the team this past season because of their relationship and his allegiance to her, and obviously a different university. Are you really a Georgia Bulldog if your girlfriend goes to Miami? So could you imagine you're a 21-year-old Rob Vanstone and someone's handing you $5 million to play a season of football? What is Rob Vanstone? What's the first thing you're going to buy?
I'd probably find some way to squander it. Probably
just irresponsibly squander it.
Yeah, when I was there was nothing about me as a 21-year-old that should even ever be discussed. Probably an apartment on overlooking Central Park in New York. So $5 million could probably get me a couple of months on Central Park West.
Yeah.
So I hope it's my wife and I. Hopefully, we could find one that accepts our dog. But if you were to just bestow $5 million on me right now, I'm sure by November I'd be starting up a GoFundMe. So we'll see.
All right. Do you have a dog in the fight when it comes to the NFL playoffs? Now that we're through the divisional round, is there anybody that you want to see? Is there a feel-good story you want to have happen?
Yeah, my dog and I both watched our beloved Denver Broncos lose 31-7 to Buffalo yesterday. So now my dog in the fight is whoever's playing Kansas City, go Kansas City opponent. That's just a mindset that's been instilled over years, given the fact that Denver's in the same division. I've always kind of root for the teams. Being a Denver fan, I went through 4 Super Bowl losses before there was that beautiful victory over Green Bay. But I kind of have a soft spot for the Vikings, who are 0-4 in Super Bowls. I have a soft spot for the Buffalo Bills, who are 0-4 in Super Bowls. I have a soft spot for Detroit that's never been to one. So I kind of cheer for those teams because I just like to see those fan bases have that day where that they could savor. Because I just remember what I was like the night the Broncos won their first Super Bowl, and I just stayed up all night listening to KOA, Denver 850 on your dial, and I just did not want that day to end. It was just so sweet. And so for Vikings fans or Lions fans or Bills fans, I'd like them to have that day, except for the Viking fan who was rude to me when I went to see the Broncos at Vikings in 2003. But everybody else was nice. It was just one guy who didn't seem to like me very much. So he must have been very intuitive.
Can we be honest? The Denver Broncos, to me, not that orange is a great color for a uniform, but the normal whatever. But their outfit yesterday and those pants, that was awful. Whoever decided that, they should have just went with the white pant. The orange pants, that's not a good look. I'm we're -1 before the games even starts.
And plus, they just come off wearing the retros, which are gorgeous. I love those old uniforms. And so going from that to whatever wardrobe malfunction was on display yesterday, I guess it was that and the offensive malfunctions. Everything was aligned that way. But it was still a good year for the Broncos. There were a lot of steps taken, and Bo Nix for
Bo Nix, and to me, Sean Payton is the best coach in the NFL, because you saw with with all that dead cap space and a roster full of no names, how important coaching is and the job that he did. If he's not the coach of the year, I always thought the Dallas Cowboys, the answer to their problems was Sean Payton. Now it won't work out, and the Cowboys announced they're moving on from Mike McCarthy, but the only one that was going to save that Jerry World would probably listen to would have been a Sean Payton. But it's going to be Denver that's now going to reap the benefits, I think, of that for the years to come. Well, the Cowboys, I think, are going to plunder. Oh, and since you're a bit of a Kansas City Chief hater, no reason to hate, Rob, as we wrap here.
I'm more envious than anything. Okay. I love watching Patrick Mahomes. I love watching Kelsey. They don't bug me as much as they used to. They used to just drive me nuts.
Because now they are the Darth Vader. They're the bad guy. They're the villain. The X is on them. Everybody is after them now because they've had success, much like with Brady. The winning is what I think attracted him a whole new following of people that didn't like him because He just won so much, and they won when it mattered. Speaking of the Mahomeses, Patrick and Brittany welcomed their third child this weekend, naming her Golden Ray. They now have 3 kids, Sterling, Bronze, and Golden.
Man, I guess it takes us back to the Olympics, and nobody names silver though when Nancy Kerrigan's silver medal. But it's amazing what kids' names are evolving into. I don't think there'll ever be a Robert again. Have you met anybody named Robert who's younger than me?
There's not a lot of Chris's with K's, and a little inside information. Our kids' names are Kalea, Naya, and Kai. We are not Hawaiian, but my wife loves Hawaiian names. Hence, some very unique. And
Those
trust
are very
me,
nice names.
it's taken the grandparents years to learn how to pronounce some of those properly. All right, we'll wrap on this. The Minnesota Vikings, tonight, they're taking on the LA Rams in Arizona. Who wins?
The way the Vikings played against Detroit in that late season game planted an element of doubt in my mind. But I still think that is a very good Vikings team. I think there's a few questions about what Sam Darnold you're going to get, but I still think by and large Minnesota is the superior team, and maybe that was just an aberration that we saw toward the end of the year. So I'm picking the Vikings to win. So congratulations to the Rams, because my predictions are always wrong.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, on the Western Pizza Guest Hotline, he's Rob Vanstone, the Saskatchewan Roughriders historian. Rob, as always, we appreciate your time. We're going to take a break and come back. It was an okay weekend for the Regina Pats. A split of games on what's turned out to be a very hot race for first place in the East Division. We'll dive into that in just a couple of minutes. Time to take a break. This is the all-new SportsCage, streaming at sportscage.com and on the radio at 620 CKRM.